Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Murphy at WoodenBoat Magazine, and I'm here with Nat Benjamin from Gannon and Benjamin Marine Railway of Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts. Nat, welcome to WoodenBoat Live.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Great. Well, and for everyone who tuned in last week, I just want to send an apology and a thank you for tuning in again today. We had a little technical difficulty, as you know, but we seem to have that resolved. And I see we have an audience tuning in now as we speak. If somebody out there in the audience wouldn't mind just typing a comment, letting us know that everything is looking and sounding fine, we'll get on with the photos and interview. Nat, you, along with Ross Gannon, founded Gannon and Benjamin Marine Railway in 1980, and from thank you, Edie from Michigan, for that sound check. Nat, could you tell us a little about the inspiration for getting started with Gannon and Benjamin, which from our perspective at WoodenBoat is it's one of the truly great institutions in wooden boat building. You build traditional plank on frame wooden boats, and you've adhered to that ethos throughout your career. But not as a sort of archival or curatorial process, but as a truly relevant process of boat building deep water vessels and day sailors and coming up with new designs. How did you get started in 1980?
Well, that's a good question. We started, Ross and I were. I came to the Vineyard in 1972, and Ross was already here. He came in the late 60s, and we both loved sailing. We had old wooden boats that we owned, and so here we were on Martha's Vineyard, and there was no place to work on them. The local shipyards really didn't like people working on their vessels below the rail, so we dreamt about having a little marine railway where we could haul boats and do our own work and fix other people's boats, maybe build some boats. We wanted it. It's sort of modeled after boat yards we had been, and one in North Africa where I spent some time. A very funky place with a railway and side track and steam winch, but great shipwrights and the kind of place that made everyone feel at home. Mostly working vessels, but they hauled some yachts, and we hauled there twice on two different boats, and it was a wonderful experience.
Were you sailing in wooden boats then?
Yeah, yep. The first time I went there was in 1969 it was my first big adventure. Well, my first big, at least, adventure as captain on a ship. I was 21 years old and was hired to deliver an old schooner from Malta back to the States. So it was a very tired, leaky old vessel. And anyway, we stopped in Ceuta, where a friend of mine, he knew the yard and recommended it, and hauled the boat, and just watching those shipwrights go to work, and they pulled out a plank and did a bunch of work on helping us out, and we did a lot ourselves. But that was my first real eye-opener into boat building. I've been doing some sailing for a couple of years, but ocean sailing, but this was my first glimpse at the shipwrights' arts, and I was just taken by it. I was just amazed at how they did these things, spiling planks and fitting frames and caulking and all the fastening and all that goes into it. So anyway, that little boatyard there is kind of how ours is, or what ours is modeled after.
Now it seems that an experience in an old leaky wooden schooner could send one in one of two directions.
Yeah, right. I could have turned into something else.
And so you came to the Vineyard and established this partnership with Ross. And if I recall, reading WoodenBoat magazine as a kid, advertisements these really compelling ads for a sweet little sloop called the Canvasback, and the tagline was "faster than a speeding duck." And I learned later that that boat in that image, which I'm going to bring up a photo of now, you built for the folk musician James Taylor, of whom I was also a great fan back then. And but could you tell us a little about how this boat came together, and your design of it, and where it came together?
Yeah. James lived on the Vineyard in those days, and he had just bought a piece of property in Menemsha, and it was very shallow water. And we'd become friends over the years, and then he asked me if I could design him a boat that would be suitable to sail up into the Menemsha Pond, and under 3 feet of draft. So a center border was in store. And he wanted a big open boat. He could pile in a bunch of people and just go out and have a great romp and take it out into Vineyard Sound, or do it, but just something you could actually pull up the centerboard and sail it right up onto a beach, which he and I did several times intentionally. So that really got me going. That was in 1979, and 79, and so I built that boat in my backyard with a helper during that winter. And then the next summer, we signed our lease with the waterfront property. And so Sally Mae was the first boat launched at our boatyard in 1980. And it was kind of a great opener for what was to come. Oops, sorry. Hold on, I got to turn off my phone.
Sure. Yeah, you take your time. And and I'll just say that this boatyard is just a fascinating and beautiful place. And there's a story here that this property really hung in the balance at one point, and was about to be used for there couldn't be a more opposite use than from what it became. Tell us about the Golden Arches, please.
Yeah, well, Ross and I walked this beach a lot, and we thought, what a perfect spot for a boatyard. There was nothing here, no dock, no shop or anything. And we knew the owner, very nice guy. He was also my dentist. And so I approached him and said, we'd love to rent this property. And he said, well, I'd love to see you guys here, but I just signed a purchase and sale agreement with the McDonald's hamburger people, and I'm afraid you're out of luck. Well, we were, of course, disappointed for more ways than one, but we went we sort of watched the scene unfold as that news got around the island, and the island pretty much went apoplectic, and there was such a groundswell of opposition against the McDonald's that finally they backed down and went away. And at that time, an old friend and a wonderful guy, an island contractor named Donald DeSorcy, he bought the property. He already owned the abutting pieces, so he bought the property, and we went to him and gave him our dream and said, we really would love to have a little shipyard here and be able to haul boats and so forth. And he was a good old boy, but he looked at these two hippie boat builders and said, "Yep, okay, we'll give it a shot." And we've been there since 1980. So,
and the rest is history, as they say.
So,
and did you begin building there immediately?
We did. We built a little catboat in there the first winter. At the same time, we kept my shop going in my backyard, because we had commissions for 2 more canvasbacks and then a 23-foot day sailor called Swallows on Amazons,
right?
Built for a Welshman, naturally. And so we kept
and exported to Wales.
Sorry,
was that boat exported to Wales, or did it?
No, it was used here, but he was he was a Welshman who grew up on the Arthur Ransom books.
Mhm.
And that's why he named it Swallows and Amazons. So we, and the shop was pretty small. So we could build a cat boat in there or something. And then we had my shop still going. And Ross had a piece of property where we could store lumber and equipment. So we were spread out a bit, but it was working. And then in 1986, we got our first, I guess you'd call it a big boat commission, 40-foot sloop, Liberty. There she is there. Um, and when we got that commission, we put in a temporary building off the end of the shop. So we had the space to build that vessel. And we launched her in 1986.
Great. And she is your design also, Nat?
Yes, she is. Yeah. She's still going strong. She's owned by a wonderful family, the Cabrals, and Critch Cabral, the son of the owner, who was also mate on Juno for a number of years. He's now down at the museum in St. Michael's, Maryland, running the museum as the head shipwright and boat guy, and he has Liberty down there with him.
Oh, lovely.
So his father is hoping it'll come back this summer.
Back to the Vineyard.
Yeah.
And next came an even bigger commission.
Yeah, a couple of years later, we got a commission from a very well-known Japanese fashion designer named Yoji Yamamoto, who is still probably the most revered fashion guy in the East. But anyway, Yoji, we got to know him. We had a mutual friend, and he came, and he went sailing on Liberty with us, and he said, yeah, he would like a boat too. So I drew up this boat, and we had a very interesting discussion. I showed him a sketch. And Yoji spoke very little English, so I would say things like, I would talk about the design and so forth, and then I would pause, and Yoji would say, yeah. And then I would talk another 5 minutes or so about other aspects of the boat, and pause, and Yoji would go, yeah. And finally I said, well, shall we go ahead and call this a contract and a deal? And Yoji said, yeah. And
that was that.
That was that. Yeah. Next day we got a deposit from his lawyer, and went ahead and built the boat.
And did that boat stay here, or did it go to Japan?
She stayed in our hemisphere. She was on the Vineyard for a number of years. Yoji's plans changed shortly after we built the boat, and he had also bought a piece of property on the Vineyard, but then he never really returned. He went off in his fashion world and kind of forgot about it. So we took care of the boat and managed it for a number of years. It was used as a charter boat out of Edgartown, did quite well. And then our friend Richard Armstrong bought her.
All right. Uh-huh.
And he had her in Maine for a number of summers in friendship. And then he sailed her to Bermuda. And as he put it, when he got to Bermuda, after a pretty rough passage, someone came up to him and said, gee, I'd like to buy that boat. And Richard said, well, it's not really for sale. We're on our way to the Caribbean and blah, blah, blah. And the person said, no, you don't understand. I want to buy your boat. And so Richard dreamed up a price, and they wrote him a check, and he sold the boat, and to a very nice couple, actually. And they kept the boat for many years. And a little over a year ago, Richard told me he had seen the boat, and it wasn't in terribly good shape, and I should go talk to them. So I went out and met the owners, very nice people, and sat in their palazzo villa overlooking Hamilton Harbor with a boat on their dock. And I said, well, after looking at the boat, I said, you really need to do some work on this. And and bring her back because she's got some serious problems. And the woman said, well, you know, my husband's into golf now and our kids are grown and not interested in this. And so I don't think we're going to do it. And I said, well, that's a shame because the boat should be saved. And she said, well, why don't you do it? And I said, well, we would do it. We'd like to do it. And she said, but we don't really want to pay for it. And I said, well, it's going to be difficult. And she said, well, why don't you buy the boat? And I said, well, all right, I'll give you $1,000 for it. And she said, okay. A few weeks later, Zoli Clark and Harry Riccardi flew out from the Vineyard, hopped aboard, did a few patch ups, had to pull out the foremast and put some glass tape on it to hold it together, and did a little bit of caulking here and there, and hopped aboard and sailed it back to Martha's Vineyard. And now it's in our shed, well on its way to a total rebuild. And our partner, Brad Abbott, is the new owner. And we are
great. All right.
So thrilled with that. So that's going to be Brad's boat. And as I say, she's getting a new deck now, and we're really pleased to see that.
Great. And well, Brad, this is a good time to introduce him, at least in spirit. He can't be with us today, but Brad is a fairly recently added third partner in your business, correct?
Yeah. It's actually been about 10 years now.
10 years.
But Brad sailed into Vineyard Haven on his way south with his family. He's from Wisconsin, and he had a boat shop out in Wisconsin, but he was taking his family south to the Caribbean for the winter and stopped in, and we got to know each other a little bit, and mentioned to him, well, you know, on your way back north in the spring, stop in again. And we're always busy in the spring in case you want to do some work. And he stopped in, and with his wonderful family, twins, Henry and Amelia, and his wife Alice, and they immediately fell into the vineyard lifestyle. And before long, we had offered him a partnership in the business, and he packed up his tools in Wisconsin and sold the farm, and now he's now they're a great addition to our island community. And Brad's been just such a great partner to have in our business. He brings to the table skills that Ross and I don't have. At least we don't have very good ones, such as systems, mechanical, electrical, all this kind of thing, state-of-the-art equipment that Ross and I used to shun until we realized that hot water is kind of nice to have now and then. But anyway, it's great to have Brad with us. And
yeah. And speaking of your original partnership, it's my understanding that you both brought considerable construction and structural skills to the business, and you have more of a design bent. And I've heard Ross described as something of a genius at moving heavy objects. And is that oversimplifying the division of labor early on between you two? Or?
I think some of that question cut out because I didn't hear the whole question. But Ross and I we have our own sort of separate skills, but there's a lot of overlap, more overlap than I would say specialty stuff that we each do. I got involved in doing the design work because I really enjoyed doing it, and that's been a wonderful thing for me. And Ross has got this inherent understanding of strength and engineering and moving heavy objects, and it's just sort of second nature to him. So between the two of us, we kind of combine our sensibilities and come up with some pretty good ideas. We don't agree on everything all the time, which is good. you don't want to have a partner that just says the same thing that you do. So
What's the use of a partner then?
yeah, so it's nice to bounce things off of each other, and we usually come up with a pretty good solution.
Hmm.
And a lot of our instruction has come from rebuilding old boats, where you take them apart and you can see right away, oh, well, that didn't work very well. We're not going to do that when we fix it, or when we build a new boat, we're going to do something else. And so you learn a lot from the great masters.
Yeah. And so, speaking of which, you and Ross joined forces on another project, Zora, and I understand that there was some considerable learning that came along with taking her apart and putting her back together. Could you tell us a little about that and how you came to that boat and what you learned from her?
Yeah. Well, this happened in 1986. Toward the end of '86, we had launched Liberty. We were feeling pretty good. The boatyard was holding steady, and a friend of ours showed us a little tiny classified ad in the New York Times actually it was in the middle of January, and it said, for sale, 72-foot schooner, 72-foot yawl, Italian built, sealed bid auction, fire damage. So Ross went down and checked it out, and this thing had been tied to the dock with so many complex electrical systems that anyway, it just burned at the dock. But it didn't burn that much. It burned a lot of the interior out, although most of it was smoke damage. It burned some decking, and there were some significant problems, but the basic boat was there. And the insurance company totaled the boat and said, auction it off. So we put a bid in with a friend for $38,000 and wound up owning the boat. And so then it was, well, okay, now what do we do? And Ross and a group went down and sailed her back in the spring. Actually, Ross and I went down together and sort of went through the whole boat, throwing away a lot of burned out electrical systems and trying to make it somewhat habitable. And we noticed when it was a lot of smoke damage down below, but we noticed if you just wiped it off, beneath it was this beautiful woodwork, and so we were pretty impressed with this old vessel. She was built in Italy in '65, laminated acacia framing, copper riveted, beautifully built. The biggest problems were with the deck, which was a teak overlay over plywood, and we found that around all the hatches in the deck house, the plywood had delaminated and was rotting, and so we had some work to do there. The deck house itself was a hideous looking Italian thing, high and sort of curvy and swept back. So we took that off with a chainsaw and built this 1930s style deck house, which we think looks more appropriate.
And on the did you revert to the original deck construction with the teak overlay?
We we had to replace the whole aft deck because it was so much fire damage.
Mm-hmm.
So from midships aft, we replaced it with a new deck, and we used silver Bali because we had it for one thing, and it's a fraction of the cost of teak. And we were able to save the forward half of the deck, the original deck, with the plywood under it. We had to replace the hatches, and so we cut them out a little bigger so we were able to repair the plywood too. But we spliced in the silver Bali deck into the teak deck.
So that was a laid silver Bali deck.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And, when it all weathered gray, you couldn't tell where one began and the other started. It all looked like just a weathered gray deck. And we've since used silver Bali again on Rebecca's deck. And in in some ways, I like it better than teak, not only because
Really?
it's not endangered, but it doesn't give you as much, it doesn't give you that washboard effect that the teak gets when the soft grain is washed away. It's very stable. Silver Valley is super stable. It's lighter weight. Um, anyway, we like the Silver Valley very much, but unfortunately, it's harder and harder to get a hold of.
So, and that I mean that brings up another little sidebar discussion. You have you developed a relationship with a local man delivering wood from Suriname, sourcing and delivering logs, and these were pretty exotic boat building timbers when you got started with it, and have become something of an industry standard since then. And if I recall, there are 4 species, including silver Bali, that you were working with principally. Could you tell us a little about those?
Yeah, yeah. I first bumped into Brad Ives in Santa Pola, Spain, when I was sailing this 1921 Norwegian racing boat that Pam and I bought in 1970, and we were sailing it in the Med, and we pulled into Santa Pola to do a haul out because there was another great old-fashioned marine railway there that we had heard about. And I met Brad. Brad was on a Baltic trader, which he was very fond of. He had a number of them over the years. Still has one. Or so anyway, that was the first time I met Brad, and then he reemerged on the Vineyard and told us about his connections in Suriname, South America, and how he was importing lumber on another sailing vessel, a steel cargo schooner, the Aventure, and we were very interested in that. So early in our career at the boatyard, we started bringing in timbers of Angelique, and then Silver Bali for planking. Silver Bali and Wana is the other one,
Mhm.
as well as some really wonderful woods like red locust and Spanish cedar, Brazilian mahogany, so forth. So we had a lot of time. We got to know Brad really well, and we would give him an order. He would go down there. Um, Often he would bring patterns with him, and he would go out into the jungle with the natives, and they would spot just the right tree with the right curve, and cut it down in the woods and chop it out and drag it back to the mill and saw it. Suriname does a good job with their forest management. They don't allow any clear cutting. It's all selectively cut, and they don't allow any logs to leave the country in raw form. So everything is milled there in Suriname, provide tremendous labor and employment to the Surinamese people, which gives the forest value. If you just take the logs away and don't give them anything, it's money goes to the government, then the locals have no interest in it and are prone to cut it down and plant something else. So, or burn it, worse, which is happening all through the Amazon rainforest. But here in Suriname, they do a good job ecologically sustainable logging, and that's why we like to deal with them.
And so, and sometime after this, your first big schooner job came along, and this is Rebecca. Do I have that right?
Let's see. Yes, that looks like Rebecca. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and
yeah, she came. Yeah, we did. Yeah, after the Lana and Harley, then we built a bunch of boats. But then in 1998, we got a commission to design and build a 60-foot schooner, Rebecca, and she's been a real pleasure to see her go around across the oceans and through the Mediterranean and so forth. But when we got that commission, we didn't really have a place big enough to build her. So we started we leased a piece of property down the road on the other side of the street, out on the waterfront, and and put up a shed, which we call the Mugwump Building. And we're still building boats in there. It's been a terrific resource for us. But we built Rebecca in there, and she was launched in 2001. Wonderful Scottish couple took it over kind of in the middle of her construction, which is a whole nother story, which Michael Ruhlman writes about in the book Wooden Boats. So I won't bore you with that. But anyway, Rebecca turned out really nicely, and she sailed in New England for a couple of years and down to the Caribbean, and then the owners took her to Europe and had her in the Med for about a dozen years, and then in England and in the Solent, and then they brought her back, and she spent a few more years sailing around New England and back down to the Caribbean, and now she just recently was donated to Mystic Seaport. And we used in the sailing program alongside of Brilliant. So
what a great pair.
Yeah. It's going to be great to see her down there, and again, well looked after and so forth.
Yeah. Now there was another schooner project, a restoration that came before her, and I have her. She's WoodenF, a little farther down in my staging here, but I'm going to bring up a photo of her because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there might be some influence here, or at least some design influence from WoodenF, which was a significant restoration for you.
Yeah, WoodenF went on the rocks in Manchester, Mass. in 1991, I think, in that terrible storm, and she pounded on the rocks for several days, and then she was finally, when it calmed down, a crane got in there and pulled the rig out and lifted her off the rocks and put her on the hard up in Salem, Mass. And a friend of ours had already, a guy named Jim Mars, who was director of a publication at Norton, and he had already planned to buy this boat before she was wrecked, and so he was very disappointed, of course, and kind of gave up. And we talked to him and said, well, why don't we get it and rebuild it, and we'll own it together. We'll have a partnership. So we formed a partnership with Jim, and Packer went up to, let's see, how did it work? First, Brownell went over to Salem, picked the boat up in their big hydraulic trailer. Packer, the local tugboat guy on the Vineyard, took a barge up to Salem, and they drove the Brownell truck onto the barge and towed her down to Vineyard Haven and drove off and put her in our backyard at the shop, and we started to go to work on her. And it was a several-year project. There was a big hole in her side, a lot of broken frames, and a lot of replanking needed to be done, some redecking, knees that had gotten, bronze knees that had gotten, cauliflowered, and floor timbers that were bent. But anyway, we had a great project. It was a great sort of spare time project, and over several years, we rebuilt her, and then had a wonderful relaunch in 1994. And I think the highlight of the relaunching was Walter Cronkite, who knew General Patton. Now, this boat was built for General Patton, I should have said, in 1939. So there was that Patton connection. And Walter Cronkite, a Vineyard Summer guy, I asked him if he'd come to the launching, and of course he did, and spoke beautifully for some time about his connection with Patton during the war and his experiences following him around North Africa, chasing Rommel and so forth. But anyway, we had a great relaunching, and then many wonderful memories since sailing that boat. And Jim Lobdell was the first skipper. And he took her to Maine a number of times, and then Ross and I sailed her quite a bit too. So it was a great adventure having that boat.
Now she's been operating out of Salem lately, I think too. Maybe between Florida and Salem. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah, she operates out of Salem in the summer, goes to Key West in the winter, and for a while during the Obama administration, she was doing charters from Key West down to Havana, and the number 45 cut that off, but but they were going to Cuba, and now they're still chartering out of Key West, but locally.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Still going. And she is sawn frame construction, is that right?
Yeah, she's double sawn frame, bronze fastened, screw fastened, double planked. And it's a pretty good construction. We built both Rebecca and Juno Juno built that same construction, double sawn frame, double planked.
Here's Juno. And Juno came along sometime after Rebecca.
Yeah, right on the heels of Rebecca. Rebecca was launched in 2001. Juno was launched in 2003. And that's a shot that Ben Mendelowitz took as we put him in the dinghy when we were heading north from Bequia up to Antigua, and that's off the coast of Martinique with Montpellier in the background. It's quite a dramatic shot and a wonderful memory. We had a really good sail up the islands.
Oh, great. And I should mention that Ben took the photographs we showed of your early boats, and many of these boats have appeared in his calendar of wooden boats over the years.
That's right. Yeah. No, it's hard to improve on that.
Yeah. And then another significant schooner, Charlotte, which you designed and built for yourself, correct?
Yeah. Ever since Ross and I started the boatyard in 1980, we said, well, we probably won't have that much work. We'll have plenty of time to build our own boats. Well, eventually we did, but it was 30 years later or more. I built Charlotte in the mugwump, in the annex from the mugwump, a little shed off the side of the mugwump shop, and had a couple of good guys helping me right through the project. I was still pretty busy. We were building and repairing boats, in the shed in both shops, so we were busy, and I got in what time I could on Charlotte, but we launched her in 2007, and she's been a wonderful family boat. Pam and I had talked about an ideal family boat for years, and we wanted something big enough to go places, but not too big that it would be a bear to maintain. And we wanted to be able to, we do a lot of day sailing around here with friends. We wanted to be able to pile on a bunch of people. Plus our expanding family now is up to 11. So we had to have all of them aboard. And anyway, so it had lots of design requirements, and she's, all boats are compromises, but we're really happy the way she turned out. She seems to fulfill her mission quite well.
So what are her dimensions, Nat? What are the ideal dimensions for what you just described?
Yeah, well, she's 50 feet on deck, 14-foot beam, long waterline, short-ended boat. She's 43 on the water, quite heavy, 58,000 pounds. Heavy, certainly by today's standards. I guess you'd call it moderate displacement by older standards. Very simple, user-friendly gaff rig. These gaff rig boats, everything sort of held together with bits of string, and it's just simple and uncomplicated. We do have hot and cold running water. We've got
Thank you,
some oil
Brad.
elevators. Yeah, we have we have chart plotter and things like that, and refrigeration, which is nice. But it's still pretty, by today's standards, it's still quite simple. No air conditioning and that kind of thing.
And you mentioned sailing her locally, but you have in fact done some significant voyaging in her too. If I recall, this photo was taken at Haiti.
Yeah, that's a picture taken on Ile Vache in Haiti, which Ile Vache is this beautiful little island, 7 miles off the southwest coast. The mountains in the background are the main island of Haiti, and they soar up to, many thousands of feet. They're just spectacular. And Ile Vache is a wonderful little island, and we're in this anchorage, the village of Kaikok, which is also called Port Morgan, where the famous captain, the pirate captain Henry Morgan, had his vessels. And there are lots of shipwrecks all around here, but it's a place we've been to a number of times, and we really just have fallen in love with this island. It's
Yeah.
the people, the crafts, the skills, the generosity, just so many wonderful things going on there.
And you've become involved in the community there, haven't you?
We have a bit, yeah, in the local village of Kaikok. Pam has really, she's done most of it through her Sense of Wonder Creations Foundation and nonprofit. She started an art program at the local community center, a music program, a couple of community gardens. We've done a fair bit of donations to the local orphanage. Anyway, so we've helped out with the water, trying to get, water pumped to the village fountain so the people don't have to climb up these ravines and put buckets of water on their head. It's a tough life these people have, and they, anything we can do to make it a little easier is fun for us, and it's certainly they appreciate it so much. You don't have to do a lot in Haiti to make a difference.
When were you last there, Nat?
Last year.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were there just a little bit before the COVID.
Yeah.
we go every year. We don't take the boat every year. We've taken the boats 4 times, I guess.
Oh,
but when we don't take the boat, we go by public transportation, fly to Miami, and then Miami to Port-au-Prince, and then take a 5-hour bus ride from Port-au-Prince to Lake Cay, and then a motorcycle through the town of Lake Cay to the port, and then a kind of a large pirogue across the sound to Ile Vache. It's quite an adventure.
Sounds it. Wow, I didn't realize it was that remote.
Yeah, it's pretty remote, but it's just beautiful. There are no cars, no electricity. We've brought solar panels down, and a lot of the locals now have the kids go to school and they can use a computer. But you see no electric lights. You see the roads are for donkeys, and now there are a few motorbikes appearing, but it's very primitive. They still build boats right on the beach, beautiful local boats with a machete and an axe, chop them out of the, whatever they can find. They still build the dugout canoes, man's earliest conveyance on the water, a hollowed out log. They still build them and use them. They go out fishing in these things.
And that pirogue you take for that last leg of your voyage, is that a dugout?
No, they have a few of these. They're not really pirogues. They're long, narrow, wet, fiberglass launches about 30 feet long, and you hop on with about 20 other Asians, none of whom can swim. And of course, there are no life jackets. There's no compass. There's a sputtering outboard on the back, and you head off. And yeah, so far we've always made it across the other side.
Yeah, great. Well, I have 3 more photos here that are really in no particular order, but they're just too good to not show. So, so we'll work through those, and then a few scenes from the shop, and if you could tell us a little about those. But here is one of the schooners, and forgive me, but I don't. I'm not sure. I've just made it go away. Hold on one sec. Here she is again.
Yeah,
Juno?
that's Juno. And this is one of the rare times where we're aboard. That was taken from Charlotte. One of the rare times when the Juno boys are looking at Charlotte's transom. It's usually the other way around. She's a lot bigger and fast. But that's Juno coming up on us. And yeah, that's right, in Vineyard Sound.
It is. Yeah. Is this the, you have a gaff rig race every year, don't you? Is that the?
Yes, we do. Yeah. And that, it may be in that race, or that could be the Vineyard Cup too. I'm not sure, but it's one of the local races. You can see the Sperry Sail insignia on the jib.
Oh, right. And speaking of Sperry Sails, have they, within the past few years, they've moved into the loft above your shop, no?
They have, yeah. Oddly enough, when we first started the boatyard in 1980, Gretchen Snyder set up a sail loft in our shop, and it was Steve Sperry who got her set up and showed her how to make sails. So now they've come back with even more skill and expertise and a better loft. And yeah, we've had them upstairs for the last 10 years or so, maybe longer. And we've always done work with them. And Ben Sperry runs the business beautifully, and they know how to cut a sail.
Yeah, great.
But Juno, while we're looking at Juno, here's a boat that is sort of the boat builder's, the boat designer's dream. She's beautifully maintained, beautifully sailed. She's been back and forth across the Atlantic, sailed all through the Med. We raced on her in the Saint-Tropez and Cannes, and she commutes to the Caribbean nearly every year when there isn't a black plague going around, at least. Yeah. And it's just such a joy to see a boat, so well cared for and so well used. It's really a tribute to her skipper, Scotty DiBieso, Robert Soros, the owner. They just do it right, and we're so blessed to have her as in our fleet.
And here's another one of your designs, Nat. This is Artemis, I think.
Yes, she's a 31-foot canoe stern gaff sloop. We launched about 5 years ago, and she's been a real pleasure too to see. She's a nice sailing boat, quite weatherly, sea kindly. She's fast. Great owners again, which make all the difference. And, yeah, she's a good addition to our stable out there.
And here's another of Rebecca.
Yeah.
Just because I couldn't resist not showing it. I think
that's it.
And Menlowitz's also. Yeah,
that was during a gaff rig race years ago. I think Rebecca's only a year old then. And yeah, it was blowing quite hard, and it actually came on to blow even harder than that's at the beginning, I think, of the strip. But Ben was on When and If, and I was on Rebecca. Bill Mayer was with me, and a few other characters, and we had just an amazing sail down to Tarpaulin Cove and back, and it was only, we sort of disallowed any boats without self-bailing cockpits. It was that rough. But Rebecca and When and If, and the Malabars, and a few other schooners and seagoing boats made the race. We were fortunate to take line honors on Rebecca. She just walked up Vineyard Sound against that northeast wind. It was quite impressive.
Wow.
It was a great day.
It looked good. And did Miles Thurlow rig her? Was his shop up and running by then?
Miles rigged Juno, the next one. This boat, I think Miles did some of the rigging on it. Billy Maybe and Dominic Zackhorn did most of it. But Miles was about 16 when Rebecca was being built. But when we started Juno, he was one of our top shipwrights, and yeah, he did all the rigging on her. And
yeah, Miles might be one of the youngest people, the youngest person we've ever had a feature article about in the magazine, a cover story, no less.
Well, he deserves one. He's a very talented young man.
Yeah, and teaches at WoodenBoat School, of course. And but it's really been fun watching his career develop, and really speaks to the. We have an article in the current issue of WoodenBoat called "In the Wake of a Black Dog," which is a reference to Bob Douglas and his influence on Vineyard Haven Harbor, and yours. But this constellation of traditional marine experts who've grown up around Vineyard Haven Harbor. And Miles is one of those.
He is one of them, and there are others too that have just caught fire with this boat building, boat design, boat sense, sailing capabilities. And there's really a remarkable collection of young people on our waterfront. That stunning group of people that know what they're doing.
Yeah, and we mentioned, of course, Ben Menlowitz's photography before, and your yard has attracted a number of writers and photographers, including a local photographer, Allison Shaw, who's made some great studies of your shop over the years. And this is one of her images of one of the schooners coming together. Is this Juno?
No, this is Rebecca.
Rebecca, okay.
Yeah, Allison did a beautiful book on the building of this boat, as well as the history of the boatyard. But she has a magic touch with the camera, for sure.
Yeah, and there is her book, Schooner, and that's still available from Allison, presumably. Allison Shaw, Vineyard Haven.
Yep, or Bunch of Grapes bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And another of Allison's shots, same boat, a little farther along.
Let's see. I guess it must be the same boat. Yeah, it must be Rebecca. Mm-hmm.
And I have a few more shop shots here, Nat. I think we determined before we got started that this is Artemis, the green boat you saw under construction.
Yes, that's Artemis, planked up, deck frames, ready for decking and deck house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then another transom stern boat. And could you tell us what this is? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. There are a lot of boats all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think that's what Here and Now, which is that's a 38-foot sloop that we built for a wonderful guy named Michael Nauman. Michael happened to be he was running. I think he was director of Norton Publishing when he assigned Michael Ruhlman to go write a book about us. Anyway, Michael Nauman lives in Berlin, but he keeps the boat on the Benjamin River in Maine and in Brooklyn, Maine. So she's got 38-foot Marconi sloop. They use it every summer. They love it.
Great. And a nice association with W.W. Norton, with Jim Mars and Michael.
Yeah.
And this is not one of your constructions, but I put it in here because it's such a compelling shot of the harbor and the general milieu there. This is a Bahamian dinghy, and the Vineyard Haven Harbor, I think, how many traditional wooden boats would you guess are in the harbor now? Well over 100?
Oh, well, that's a big number. The harbor's not that big.
Mhm. Yeah,
But I guess if you count all the little ones, it might come
I
close to
do.
that.
Yeah,
But
and
that's
this
a
is one of Tyler Fields' images.
oh yeah, yeah.
And
But
Tyler's been,
that's a good view of the harbor with that little Bahamian boat. That's one of the Douglas's fleet, and of course Alabama in the background.
a pilot schooner Alabama. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And here we have two of your smaller boats, pocket cruisers. This is the Bella class, correct?
Yes. Yep. 21-foot day sailor. We built 7 of these. They seem to be popular, and they're really fun boats to sail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have offhand, Nat, the total output from the yard at this point? The number of hulls built?
I think we're getting around. I think it must be hull number 80 or so. 81 was the last builder's plaque, as I recall. Which it really isn't there very many if you've been around doing it for 40 years. It's only a couple of boats a year, but it's um,
Well,
it's
I guess
been
it depends on how you're doing it.
well. That's right. How you're doing it, and hopefully they'll all be around for another 40 or 80 or 100 years.
And there's the difference.
Yeah.
And our final image, and this is a recent project. You had mentioned the Vineyard Haven Cup, and this is a recent winner. Before you restored her, John Kerry's Alden designed Lark. Can you tell us a little about her and the significance of this boat to the Kerry family?
Yeah, Lark was built for the Forbes family on Noshawn in 1931. John Alden design, and they so John Kerry, whose mother was a Forbes, he spent a lot of summers on Noshawn, so he knew the boat when he was a kid, and he sailed on her as a kid. And when it came up for sale a couple of years ago, I gave him a call and said, "Should we go look at this thing?" And so we did, and it was sitting in a shed in Woods Hole, and we went all through it, and I said, "Well, it's going to be a big job, but it would sure be a great boat." And John had sold his bigger boat a year or so before, and he was looking for something that he could
Seem to have
do.
lost. Oh, there's Nat. You're back. Your screen went blue for a moment.
Oh, well, that's all right. Probably a pleasant relief. Anyway, so John decided, yeah, he'd like to do it. He's recently moved to the Vineyard. He's got a house on the Vineyard, and he's become a great member of our community now. And we went to work and spent the winter. Basically, built a new hull. We saved the keel timber, the lead ballast, part of the stem, and a couple of doorknobs, and the door to the head, and everything else was new. And Miles did a whole new rig, spectacular job. Made all the blocks, so did all the rigging. And she's got a suit of north sails. She's a nice sailing boat. She really, really goes well. Ross's daughter Greta Gannon was the mate last summer, and she did a lot of sailing on her.
Oh, nice. And was it last year that she took the Vineyard Cup?
She won the Vineyard Cup, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, she won the Eggertown Regatta Round the Island race.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
That's what she won.
Great.
Yeah,
Well, we are looking forward to. I'm sorry, Nat. Go ahead.
That was practically her first sail. We launched her July 23rd, and got the rig in and took a couple of sea trials, and then she went on August 1st. She went in the race and took the trophy.
Well done. Well, we're looking forward to telling her story later in the year in WoodenBoat magazine. So stand by for that.
Right.
And there's a question here in the comment stream, just jumping back to that Bahamian dinghy for one moment. Rich is wondering if that is a Weiner Malone build. Do you happen to know?
I don't know. I don't know if she's Albury or Malone or who. Bob Douglas would know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Rich. Well, watch the comment stream, and if we get confirmation, we'll let you know. And Nat Benjamin, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been fun and informative, and congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thanks all for watching, and we're looking forward to an early spring and a long summer. Lots of good sailing to everyone.
We sure are. And you too, Nat. Hope to see you in person soon.
Yeah, I look forward to that, Matt.
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.